Welcome back to Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
And welcome back to town.
Thank you.
So we've got some interesting conversation over artificial intelligence today. And I know that you have a longer history of it than I do. You've been aware of it for a long time because you've been in the technology space for much longer than I. But there are some hopes, there are some expectations, but there's definitely some fears about artificial intelligence. And so based on our earlier conversation on algorithms and the interaction that we had with folks, I think it might be interesting to kind of scratch the surface of the AI topic a little bit today.
Yeah, and let's just start out by saying we are not AI experts by any
Not even
stretch.
close.
I just know what I've been reading about lately and just have some comments and just some general comments. But it is a fascinating comment, and I think if you back up to the 100,000 foot level and just talk about technology in general, it's not a question of if we should have AI, it's when and how. I mean, we're not going to stop it. So let's just stop that illusion right now. AI is here. It's already in our lives. You may not even be aware that it's already producing content that you're looking at. And so just how will we use it, et cetera. I remember when calculators came into schools, and when I went to college, we had to buy a TI-58 programmable calculator, but we weren't allowed to bring it into tests, right? And so, the way that technology comes in is, again, it's inevitable. It's just how do we deal with this? AI has the potential of being really, really dangerous. And so we have to treat it as such. But just like nuclear technology and nuclear weapon technology, it wasn't that we could hold it back and just outlaw it. It's going to happen. So how do we deal with it is the more important question than if we can ban it or if we don't have to deal with it.
So let's back up to some real basic definitions, because I don't want to make an assumption that everybody's on the same level of understanding about what AI is and what it does. So at its kind of most baseline definition, what is artificial intelligence?
So artificial intelligence is just, and there's lots of definitions, and wisdom is in the definition of terms, as we always say, but artificial intelligence is what it says, in that intelligence right now only resides in the human brain. And we could talk about animals and how they're more habitual or instinct related. Some can be trained. There's higher levels of intelligence that we talk about in monkeys and sharks or dolphins, etc. There can be some training, but it's really stimulus response based. In between stimulus response, humans have this very unique space that's called the freedom to choose, to think and to reason, and that's in between stimulus and response. Computers, kind of the same way. Most computers these days have been like animals. They do what they're trained to do. If you want a certain response out of a computer or a machine, you build it and train it to do that thing. And then you have to give it, in this situation, you do this. It's called if-then statements. Artificial intelligence says, okay, machines have started to go beyond the if-then statement, and we've divided that up, and in a given if, it can make some decisions about the then, and it can start to make choices, and it can learn and think on its own. Another example would be if you taught a computer algebra and then gave it some time and it came up based on algebra with calculus. In other words, it on its own is coming up with knowledge and intelligence that it was not given.
Scary.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey. People have been predicting AI for a long time, as long as hydrogen fuel cell cars, right? Those are just around the corner for the last 50 years. And who knows what extent it will take in our lives and how fast and when. But things that are where you see money and activity and resources going into tend to happen. And we're seeing a lot of resources and activity going into it right now. we have many examples around, and it's starting to make the news.
Yeah.
So that means that it's out of the lab and into our lives.
Right. For the robot world, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've seen this live and in person at the last 2 or 3 conferences that we've been at. So we're in the renewable energy sector. We've been at conferences around that subject matter. And I've been surprised that, Boston Electronics, the one with the robot dog, the yellow robot dog. So they've had a display the last couple of shows that we've been at. And initially I was like, well, what a weird intersection. Why would they have a display at an energy conference? But I'm quickly learning that these robots and the way that they're being programmed to think are going into every space. And so they had the robot dog out on the floor and showing how it was interacting with people. And so back to your, original definition of the programming by if-then statements, at some point this robot dog is programmed to say, if you see an obstacle, then stop, right? And then it goes to, if you see an obstacle, then move left or right. And then it progresses to, if you see an obstacle, then do, one of these long strings of equations of what it can do. But now it's stepping over things and leaping over things and, coming up to you like an actual dog and kind of, pawing at your leg. And it's becoming more and more real in the sense that it's, acting and behaving like you might expect an animal to. But to your point, given enough time and programming and I guess letting the computer do its computer thing, at some point, it gets to make a determination on its own what it's going to do if it comes up to an obstacle.
One of the debates in machine learning and let's just take autonomous driving for a second.
Okay.
So one of the big problems with autonomous driving is that it's all been being programmed to this point with no AI. And AI and autonomous driving is a whole nother subject, but it's germane to this conversation. To this point, it has been saying, just like you talked about with the dog, if you see an obstacle in front of you, stop. And now they can see green and red lights. They know where stop signs are, etc. But all that's been programmed in. Here's where it makes a difference, and this is where autonomous driving people say, we don't want autonomous driving because we don't want machines making decisions for us. And the classic one they come up with is, okay, you're speeding down the road and all of a sudden a child darts out from one end and an old lady is walking in the other. You're going to have to choose which one to hit. Which one do you choose? And that's going to be programmed by a human today. And they're saying no human has that right. And the machine is not going to be able to make the decision at the moment like a human could. Artificial intelligence would say that the machine could make that decision.
Wow.
And this is the argument, it could make it faster than a human. So it would analyze and then make that decision and boom, and it would be over. And we as humans who like to control things, sometimes that makes us feel a little uncomfortable to give up that control.
Certainly. There's a lot of folks that I think are just starting to dabble in the AI world to see what it can do. And ChatGPT is an example of that. And so I know that you've had some interaction with that company, or that, is it a company? I don't even know what to describe it as.
Yeah, it is an AI platform made by a company. And I was just at a conference just last week and somebody asked me about ChatGPT and I was able to say, oh, that's so last month. The thing about AI is it's moving forward, and it's moving forward so rapidly that there's going to be things that we think is amazing about ChatGPT. Have you ever used it?
Yeah, I actually, for our purposes, I'll tell you in a minute. Finish your thought.
Well, I'm just saying it's pretty amazing, and it does do some pretty amazing things. And people have found flaws, of course, but there's now other people who said, at Stanford and other places that have said, oh, we're way beyond that now. Look at this, look at this, look at this. We're going to be inundated. I mean, this ChatGPT is the first one that kind of made the news and came into the realm of more people who are paying attention versus, because the whole group of people who are there's some people who just don't pay attention to anything. Then there's the group of people who are kind of paying attention to what's going on in the world. And then there's scientists and engineers and programmers who've been thinking about this for a long time. So it bridged the gap into the general knowledge, so to speak, and started making the news. And lots of articles have been being written about AI recently because of ChatGPT. So it has absolutely served its purpose in getting people to think and talk about it and say, what do we do about this technology? But it is pretty amazing.
It is. So I used it on two fronts. First off, I asked it to write me a, 100-word or 200-word post about curiosity, not judgment. And I wanted to see what it would come up with, and I put it on Facebook. I did that a couple weeks ago. It was pretty amazing what it came up with. But then I went in there a second time and I said, can you transcribe our podcast? And it replied to me that it could not, but provided me 3 or 4 different examples of companies that I could, employ to do just that. And
so much to unpack there, but go ahead.
Well,
finish your thought.
I was amazed, first off, by that little narrative that it wrote, and just by those 2 words. That was all the instructions I gave. Like, write me a little essay, 200-word essay on curiosity, not judgment. The thing it came up with was pretty astonishing. But then, it knew its limitations, but to your point, the speed at which things are changing, I almost wonder if I were to go back to that program or something similar in 6 months' time or a year, if I asked that, would it be able to do it without batting an eye?
Yes, and so there's, like I said, a lot to unpack there. Number one is one of the concerns about AI is that it can make decisions faster than humans. We take time to process things, and we put thought into things, especially in this day and age where you can get canceled for the wrong comment. We put thoughts into things, and whether we'll even discuss a subject out loud. ChatGPT is not restrained by that. It will just boom, and it does, so it doesn't process, and it doesn't think, and it doesn't judge whether or not it should say something or not. So it's instantaneous. Now, if you did not get an instantaneous answer, it's because of the points in between you and the system and how much it's being taxed and used and everything else. But it could have given you an answer instantly. And it did give an answer when yours came into the queue instantly, and how long it came to get back to you is a different subject. But the point is, it can do it right now. Whereas you and I trying to sit down and write a book is more difficult.
Yes, it is.
And so that's one of the concerns with AI is that it processes faster than us. So basically, if you had an AI computer and you had a human being, it's going to start, winning chess games and then figuring things out, strategies and things like that, faster than we can.
Yeah.
So if I'm a corporation and I think I'm trying to come up with a new corporate strategy, if I can give the proper inputs, maybe it comes up with a better strategy than we do. Is that how we want to run our companies? Maybe if I'm a government official and I'm trying to come up with a new policy, I let the artificial intelligence do it. And it's not going to take any time at all.
Right.
Now, so that's the first thing, is to talk about the speed of which it happens. The second part is, how are these going to evolve? Which you said, okay, very astutely, if I come back in 6 months and ask it again, will it be different? Yes. Now, by definition, because it has learned since then, and there's been other people who've asked other similar and overlapping and intersecting questions, which it's gained some knowledge on, so it's going to change its answer. And so by definition, it hopefully does have a different answer in 6 months, just like you and I would have a different answer in 6 months.
Right.
And hopefully we're all growing and learning, right? But the other thing is, are there other platforms that are going to be able to come up with even a better answer? And that's what's up for debate. And how much of the responses are still a result of its programming? There are people on different sides of a question, go nuclear, don't go nuclear, different sides of different political questions, that have asked it things and gotten responses back and posted it and said, look, this thing still has a bias. Now, interestingly enough, it's trying to make a machine act like a human. Don't we all have biases?
Oh, without question. Isn't that, 90% of our conversation any given week about our bias and what we need to do to be curious rather than judgmental?
Or, well, okay, yes. and not judgmental. The judgmental part is a symptom of a thought process that we're going through, and we are saying let's be open to other things than just a decided action or emotion or judgment, etc. And let's be open to other judgments or other data, and constantly be taking in new data and know that we can change our mind. But having said all that, we are creatures that like to come to judgments quickly and categorize things, as we've talked in past podcasts, because otherwise it's too hard. We cannot live in a world where we are taking in the 976 stimuli per hour, per minute, whatever you want to say, and live.
Yeah.
We have to categorize things as human beings. Our brain cannot do. Another thing that AI can do is they can take in multiple data and stimuli, depending on how big its memory and other functions are, and it can quickly outstrip a human. So it can take in more data and, quote unquote, make better decisions if we trust the decisions.
Yeah.
So let's go back to what you said about the thing that it wrote about curiosity, not judgment. What did you like about it, and what did you not like about it?
I'm wishing I had it pulled up, and maybe I can find it while you're, asking.
Well, just in general, just all.
I just found that it was a high level overview, that the concept was engaging, and I felt it sounded very articulate and sounded very human. It sounded like something that I would have written.
Those are interesting comments. So the more articulate something is, the more human it is?
Well, in this particular case, I understand that I read in my own voice, as we all do. We hear something when we read it in our own head. And so perhaps I attributed my own voice to it more than was naturally there. But I did feel a sense that it was something that was passable for content that I would have composed.
Okay. Now that's a different statement.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, because you didn't program that.
No, I did not.
And you had nothing to do with it.
No.
And it made a response based on your question, not knowing who you were.
Correct.
You might have been asking curiosity, not judgment, when you really were thinking, I want to be judgmental, and I think people who are curious are stupid and slow, right? And yet it gave you the same response, to not dependent on your motivation.
Yes, that's correct.
That's an interesting aspect of AI, because think about it. Now, again, we just said that all humans are biased, and so if artificial intelligence is more human-like, it's going to be biased by definition, which is a whole nother subject we can come back to. But you liked the answer. This is where I was trying to get to. So what does that mean? And does that reinforce what you're thinking?
Wow. Yeah, these are questions I haven't actually considered at all. Does it reinforce what I was thinking? I think it supported my thought process that was present anyway, but because we have been, this is episode, I think, 69, so for 69 weeks, we have been discussing this, thinking about it, processing it. So this has been very deeply, engaged in my brain and my thought process. And so, that answer may be much more complex or much more involved than the average Joe would want to think about that hadn't been participating in this conversation for the last umpteen weeks.
So it had an evolved set of statements or positions or like you said, articulated sentences and responses. How long did it spit out? Did you specify?
I think I did. I don't remember. It's been many weeks ago, but I think I specified word count.
Okay, so if you did that, then, and that makes sense that you did that, then it's interesting that it chose the concepts it needed to write about and chose the amount of time, and with the given input of how much time it had to do it, it chose to write these things, of which you were in general agreement of, and a little surprised at how well it articulated the ideas.
Well, and it does make me question, now that we're having this conversation, which I'd not thought about before, is it doing a split-second scan of the internet and it's seeing that phrase put together, curiosity, not judgment, it's seeing that phrase as a label in 60, maybe 60 episodes at that time when I asked the question, it's seeing the description underneath each of our episodes. Is it using all of that data and processing it that fast in order to contribute to the little paragraph that it spit out? I have no idea. I don't know where it's deriving its information, but maybe it sounded articulate and consistent with my voice because it was pulling from my voice.
Wow. That's putting a high importance on our podcast.
No, I'm just saying it knows who's
It's a
asking
possibility.
the question.
That's within the realm of possibility, and it does know who is. So if it went out, boy, this is really getting scary. So if it literally went out and did research, so now we're accusing the AI bot of doing its own research, and since it knows your name because you asked it, it could have done a pretty fast search of the internet, found your name and that phrase, and come up and produced exactly what you wanted. That's an interesting one. Is an AI platform trying to please its programmers or please its questioners? And does it know how to do that? And is it doing research? Or is it thinking on its own? So is it, and if it's pulling just from the internet, and remember last week we talked about algorithms. Mm-hmm. If certain things are being suppressed by algorithms and certain things are being promoted by algorithms, well then its opinion is based, just like the rest of us, on what it sees. And if it's doing research, it would say, let's say it found 100 articles in support of this and only one negative of it, then it would naturally form the opinion that this 100 articles was more relevant than this one.
All right, I'm going to pivot real quickly from words and articles to images. So I don't know if you've seen this, but there has been a growing trend for people to pay, I don't know, it's like $65 or something like that, to pay a company to allow AI to produce your professional headshots.
Yes, I've seen that.
And I have seen a couple of results of that, which are astonishing. So I believe you get a package of, let's say, 20 images that AI has generated. So the person whose post I saw said 3 of them were usable, the rest of them were questionable, and showed examples why. So perhaps there was a pose that AI generated where there was a hand, near the face, and there's too many fingers, or a situation where there is, a problem with the ear, and just something's not quite right. But I find this bizarre in so many ways that AI can now make a determination about what your best pose is to present yourself in physical appearance to your professional network.
I prefer to use a headshot from 20 years ago. But let's, all that aside, that's interesting because you know where the phrase an arm and a leg came from.
I don't.
Okay, well, so in medieval times, people would have portraits painted of them before photography in order to leave a legacy and to have an image of them. And so there was a certain price for a headshot only. But people who were very wealthy would have a full body. But have you ever noticed how many times there's a hand behind or, et cetera, et cetera?
Posed in such a way?
Because arms and legs, and especially hands, are hard to draw and hard to make look good. So when it says, if you did this and asked a painter to say, I want you to paint this versus this.
Okay, now we got to explain for people listening. So hands in front versus hands behind.
Sorry, yes. So if you were asking a painter to do hands and arms and legs, it was going to be much more expensive than if you didn't. So it costs you an arm and a leg. Okay. And so anyway, just given that, it turns out that artificial intelligence is not really great at drawing hands either. And so, and I've just read an article just 2 days ago about how that's now improving, I'm sure because there's been some emphasis on it. But isn't that funny in the natural evolution of things that AI would have the same problems as humans?
As Michelangelo, huh? All right, so in our 60 remaining seconds, AI, a good thing or a bad thing?
You can't judge it. And what we have to do is be curious about, towards the whole point of this podcast, is what is its uses? Should they be regulated? Can I use it for certain things? Am I allowed to turn in a paper written by it? how much of content needs to be original still, et cetera. I mean, in other words, you can't say it's good or bad. It is.
Yeah.
And so now what?
Mm.
And that's the curious question.
Now what? Well, we might end up doing a part 2. We'll see how this all shakes out, and maybe we should wait 6 months to see what part 2, how drastically it's changed.
It will be an AI podcast, so we won't be involved.
We may have some wacky hands that are moving in the background, but we'll see how it all shakes out. All right, well, thanks for your time and attention. Would love to hear your feedback and your comments on AI, your thoughts about it. Have you used it positively or negatively? Just very curious about that. So hit us up at curiositynotjudgment.com or comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
And take care.